We didn't talk about it much. The only thing we really talked about was, it actually made me think, like, why am I living here? Well, yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of Is Cincinnati a Good Place to Raise a Family? In our previous video, we did an interview with a couple from a different city who had moved here just a few years back. In this video, we're interviewing a couple who's lived here basically their whole life. Want to show you guys the difference between those two situations. Let's get into it. Here we are, welcome back. This is part 2 of the Is Cincinnati a Good Place to Raise a Family? I'm here with my dear friends, Dave and Laura McMurray. We've been friends for 20-ish years now,
around that.
Probably.
Something like that.
And they're part of the Sztanyo clanyo as well. You guys bought this house, this beautiful house. I love this home.
Thank you.
But thank you guys for jumping in here, for taking the time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your family?
I'm Dave. Obviously, this is Laura, like you said. We have 4 kids. Our oldest is just about 14. Our youngest is 8. I grew up in Fort Thomas, so we're in Ohio now. I grew up right across the river in a small town where Eric currently lives, so I'm a Fort Thomas guy. Laura can share a little bit more about where she's from. I have lived here my entire life. I went away for college, came back after college, had a little bit of a gap in between where I actually left the country for a little bit, but ended up here, and yeah, we love it, raising a family.
Yeah. So I actually did not grow up here. I grew up in Indianapolis, but met a friend in college who was convinced to move here after college, and she convinced me to move here. And after just living here a year, I would say Cincinnati felt more like home than Indianapolis had. And I've never really wanted to leave.
So, in part 1 of this video, we had someone who moved here from Minneapolis, had lived there 20 years. You've grown up here your whole life, and you've done a little bit of both. But it'll be interesting to hear, and Dave, maybe hear from your side of things here, growing up here in Cincinnati. Curious some of your memories from childhood, or how you thought about it as a kid. Maybe you didn't think about this much as a kid, but then transitioning that to getting married, starting your family. Why did you decide to stay here?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I think back to my childhood, very different than I feel like the childhood that our kids are experiencing. In a lot of ways, very similar in a lot of ways, but I was on my bike all the time. I don't know if you relate to that, but rode everywhere and would just leave at the crack of dawn, get back, after dusk, and was just out all day. And I think one of the things that stands out to me is how, growing up in kind of what felt like a small town, Fort Thomas, and knowing a lot of folks and having kind of that, that degree of intimacy that you get from that type of experience. But then also, I remember as a kid, like realizing, wow, this small town kind of sits nestled in this really like diverse and vast area around. And I just remember these few glimpses of like crossing that street that I never crossed, or going up to the top of that hill and like looking out and seeing, and it felt so big to me as a kid. And I didn't really appreciate that I lived right outside of like a metropolitan area and all that offered. But I think as I think more about it as an adult and as we're raising kids, the idea that you're so close to so many different things. And again, as a kid, I didn't appreciate that. It just felt big. But as an adult, I'm like, I love that I can be downtown in, 20 minutes almost from anywhere. And I also love that there's 2 or 3 ways to get everywhere. And if there's traffic one way, you can always take 2 other solid ways, which is not the case in a lot of other parts of the country that we've traveled to. So
Yeah. I think too, as I'm thinking about just how many different areas there are in the city, we can find amazing parks, tons of hiking trails, and then 10 minutes from that, we can go to the museum, we can go to the aquarium, the zoo, and there's just so many options, especially with young kids, to be able to create adventure and create something different. It doesn't have to be an outdoor adventure. If it's rainy, we can go to the museum.
There's a farm, there's like a working farm right at the top of our street.
Yeah.
And we're in a newish, like subdivision, relatively speaking. But yeah, top of the street, there's a farm and there's horses and
sheep.
Yeah, sheep. And then we pass cattle on my way to downtown, like 3 minutes from here. There's a whole.
Tell the people how old your kids are.
Our kids are 14, almost 12, 10, and 8.
Okay. So I'm curious from the mother perspective, you mentioned some activities that you just love to do, but growing up here and having the children here, what do you think is unique about Cincinnati? What do you like about Cincinnati? What do you not like about Cincinnati in terms of activities, schools, anything like that around the kids?
Yeah, I think, so we started out homeschooling our kids, and I think, I don't know how this is in other cities, but it feels like there is a lot of support no matter how you school your kids. With homeschooling, it was like we had our choice of any kind of co-ops or nature clubs. There's hybrid programs with 2 days a week. There's co-ops that you can take just a couple classes for your kids. There's, any way you want to school your kids, there's so many options.
I just want to dig down a little bit deeper into that. A lot of people might not know what that is, but talking about homeschool options more, there's a lot of those here in Cincinnati, but can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so co-op is kind of just offering a way to do more of like a traditional school feel, but still have the flexibility or the lifestyle of homeschooling where you're not locked in 5 days a week, 8 to 4 or 8 to 3, whatever it is.
Right, it's cooperative, like-minded people get together to say, hey, we all want to educate our families a certain way. What if we rallied together and like stronger together kind of thing? And can create something,
and you can find different people who have expertise in art or teaching music or science who have studied that or passionate about it, and maybe that's not your forte, but you want to still offer that to your children.
Yeah.
But you still want to homeschool, and so there are a lot of opportunities for that. Some are like a hybrid, which will be maybe 2 full traditional type school days, where they go and they're learning and have their different classes that cover everything.
So you're dropping off your kids at this location 2 days a week.
Right.
They kind of review everything from the previous week. They get loaded up for all the curriculum for the next week, and that's what they're working on home the other 3 days of the week.
Right. So you're getting those 3 days with your kids.
Which is nice because you're not creating something from scratch the other days of the
there's
week.
support.
You're actually following a lesson plan or some,
So it gives you a little bit of just assurance knowing, okay, I'm hitting all my bases here, I'm covering what I need to.
Yep.
So I think, support.
What I think is important for people to know that between the public schools, the homeschool options, which have been around for 20, 30 years, but probably definitely saw a spike after COVID, whether it's not just faith-based communities maybe doing homeschool, it's like just a lot of people who want more control of the curriculum or the education for their kids. So you've seen a kind of a burst of those. And then here in Cincinnati, there's a lot of, you mentioned Catholic schools, there's a lot of different private schools. So when you're thinking about education for your kids here locally, knowing that there's a pretty wide spectrum of options here.
Right.
Yeah,
and maybe just to double click that a little bit, I think what I've experienced is there's opportunity and means and energy in rallying together with people who might want to educate in a similar manner as you do, to create something or to connect in that way. And again, that may be the case for other cities, but I see it just feels like the wheels are greased for people who want to educate their children in certain ways to do that effectively.
And I think part of that, and you were kind of hitting on this earlier, I'm curious your thoughts, is just the size of the city in general. It's often kind of shared here that Cincinnati is a big town city with a small town feel. And if you're living in New York or Chicago or LA or or wherever, you don't feel like Cincinnati's a big city. I get that.
Right.
But in terms of metro sizes, we're like, I don't know, it's like 25th, 27th or something like that in terms of the US. But there's a connectiveness, there's kind of like that Kevin Bacon game where you know everyone in the city just a few degrees apart.
Sure.
So, and that helps with like these educational components and these different community tie-ins. But how have you experienced that growing up and now living here as parents in the city?
Yeah, I think was it the 6 degrees of separation,
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon or whatever. I think that hits the nail on the head. I mean, I think there really is this, if I don't directly know somebody in a sphere that I'm interested in or want to get connected to or I'm interacting with, then I know somebody who knows somebody. And I think, I think that feeling of, when you look at these metro areas that you were mentioning, and a lot of the folks, when I went away to college and met people who would say, hey, I'm from Chicago, like, no, I'm actually an hour outside of Chicago in this area. Or my first question would be, how long does it take you to get to, downtown? And it was always a lot farther than I experienced being away from Cincinnati, in the areas that we've lived. And I think that's one of the things where, like, it does have that big city, small town overlap. But what's awesome about it is, you actually, anywhere you're at in the area, you're not that far from the city, which I think is unique. Like, you have to have a city this size for that to be true.
Yeah. It's not, there hasn't been a huge boom yet where it's like pushing people that hour out. So how have you taken advantage of that, both for, your marriage and for your kids, in terms of enjoying and interacting with the city?
Well, when I think about it, I'm like, if we want that big city feel, we want to go to a really nice restaurant, we could have a date night or a date day where we go to a great restaurant downtown and then drive 20 minutes out and hike somewhere. Or, we can get
Both
in
the same evening, right?
Yeah, it's because everything does feel really close.
Yeah, one of the things I thought of, this is not directly related to your question, but I think from like a date perspective or spending time with the family, being in other newer areas, especially out west, like newer areas of the country where everything was developed with different intentions, right? And is a lot newer, and there's a feel to that, right? There's a feel, Arizona comes to mind, right? There's a feel. I used to spend every summer in Arizona during college, and we go back quite a bit, and you just have a feel when desert gets transformed into communities in the last decade, and that's done very differently than how a community kind of forms.
What is it specifically, the differences?
Yeah, I just think the aspects that there's just a different level of exhaustion sometimes that comes from the way communities have developed recently, right? So like urban sprawl and the way that people have kind of from scratch built up these very commerce-driven, areas, and the lack of character, right? Like everything feels cookie-cutter. Now there is diversity in it, and obviously there's beautiful areas of Arizona, and goes without saying. But I think what's interesting for the kids is being able, like, there's history here, and again, there's a lot of history in a lot of places, and places that have more history than Cincinnati, but. Yeah, I love that. I love that there's some history here and we can interact with it in some unique ways, and especially, that sports history. There's like architectural history, and again, I'm sure this isn't unique to just Cincinnati, but these are things that have, I think, become important, especially when I think about, it's almost decision paralysis sometimes where, it's a Saturday, and it's like, well, what do I want to do with my kids? Like, I could go to like this beautiful park. We could go do this hike that we've been talking about doing. Just as easily, we can park and ride, I'm blanking on the trolley or the streetcar, up and down the city, jump on and off with our kids, and like walk around, go to Fountain Square, get donuts, ice cream, all that stuff is, and
it's accessible.
It's accessible, and we could do it at the flip of a switch because it's 20 minutes away.
Yep. You guys, I know, have traveled a lot. Like you said, you've been to Phoenix, and oftentimes you've done summers and big road trips across the country. So, you've taken your kids to a lot of different cities. You grew up here and you decided to live here when you've seen a lot of other places, and you obviously could have moved your family to other places. What do you think makes Cincinnati unique? Why have you decided to stay here versus, why not taking them somewhere else?
Part of it is the people, the relationships. There is, I think, something really unique in our city. I feel like we've noticed that as we've visited friends all over the country who are like, man, we'll share about our community of friends, or our church community, and they're like, man, I wish we had something like that here. Like, we've been here 10 years and still really haven't found that. So I do think there's something unique in our city, just in terms of that. But then even as far as aesthetics or what there is to offer, we actually almost got convinced to move to Oregon once, and we thought about it long and hard right before we bought this house. And it was really just the beauty of the area that drew us. We were like, oh man, if anywhere could pull us away, you know. It's so beautiful, and we just loved the style of houses. And then turns out you can find that style of house here, and we found it.
We found it.
We were like, this house feels like Oregon, and I think that'll scratch the itch.
Yeah.
And I get to be with all my friends still.
And I still get to keep my friends, but feel very Oregon.
Yeah, I know we've hit this before, and earlier in the conversation, but again, our extended experience kind of is, Arizona, Indianapolis for her family, and here. I mean, so there are so many places that we just don't have an extended experience in, but the diversity, I mean, I know I hit that, like the diversity of, like, we are, if, the viewer could see our house, like, it's cedar sided, we're in the middle of the woods in a lot of ways, and it's unique. And it felt, like she said, we saw it and we're like, we had this kind of nostalgia for our visits to Oregon. And that's just one of dozens of what I would say. I was talking with someone the other day who was moving, they're renting their house to someone who's moving from another major metropolitan area, and they said the people, what they were looking for was kind of this country cottage, and the house and the land that it sat on, because there's access to that, because there's still, like I said, still a lot of farmland. I mean, you could go 15 minutes outside of downtown Cincinnati and easily purchase like acres upon acres. And that was what they were looking for. And that's totally different than what we have, but it exists in the same city. And I think there's so many distinct neighborhoods of Cincinnati. I mean, I have so much fun. We're still exploring, the east side of town, which is where we're at. And I'm always fascinated by just the diversity of the houses. And I think, again, we take a month and we travel most of the continental United States and focus a lot of our time out west. And I think, and again, it's beautiful, right? I mean, it's like why we do it. And besides the reality of, when we were looking at moving to Oregon, like you start to look at the cost of living, and it's again, it's outrageous, but which is why people are flocking from there to here. Yep. But I think there legitimately is enough diversity of people in place here that, like she said, it does kind of like scratch that itch and has some of that feel. Again, I'm not trying to upplay Cincinnati
we talked about
versus
that
the
in part
coast,
one, kind of the centrality of Cincinnati and how you can hit all these other cities of Indy and Chicago and Detroit and Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, go around, DC and Knoxville, Nashville, et cetera. But also what you're saying is you've got this lower cost of living. Mm-hmm. So if you're someone who loves to travel, like this is a great home base.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's central to all these kind of eastern cities, but you and a number of other friends have done the road trip out west. You're saving money throughout the year, even if you want to fly and hit Southwest or Frontier or whatever airline you want to pop onto. Because the cost of living is lower, you can still go enjoy those places, but you don't necessarily have to pay the bill to live there all the time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very, very true.
A lot of lipstick on this so far, all the good parts. But you guys have been here. The people need the dirt. Like, what are the, if you're talking to people who are considering moving to the city, what are some of the negatives? Like, what are some of the downsides of Cincinnati that people might not enjoy?
Proximity to the beach, if you like the beach.
It feels like it's not Oregon.
We've got East Fork Lake State Park.
There is. We're close.
That's true.
Yeah, we're absolutely close.
It's not quite the same.
Not quite the same.
I think the things that come to mind, I wish it was more bikeable. that's something. I mean, there are areas of town that are bikeable, but
From
I
a
wish
bike path standpoint.
bike path and commuting. Like for me it'd be pretty dangerous for me to get from here to my office closer to downtown.
Or bike lane, maybe I should
There
say.
is a bike lane.
There is bike, but just I think the care and consideration around that area.
There's been a
wish was
movement towards trying to push that, but
and
it's hard.
really hilly, right?
It's
It's
hilly,
the city of 7 hills.
and
there's
also
always
when you're
a-
within downtown, it's all scrunched in because you're surrounded by those hills and the river, and so they've been trying to get lanes in, but it's like, no, you're just taking away from a car lane if you do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think to interject, one of the things is, you can fly under the radar, not draw a lot of attention, but there is this kind of big fish in a small pond mentality where if you want to kind of germinate an idea and seed an idea or start a business, that there's actually it's small enough of a field that people can rally around you and you can be influential.
There's room for that.
In a positive sense.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I think people who grew up here, we always want that respect nationally. Like whether it's the sports teams or business or whatever it is, we're not. It's like the Rodney Dangerfield, like can't get no respect, and but from other people who are from other places, and I'm thinking about sports in particular, like the Western and Southern Open, the tennis open, like the most famous tennis players in the world, they love coming here because they can just fly under the radar and do their own thing and big news here locally is Bengals just signed Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and one of the questions in the press conference was like, why did you guys want to stay here? And Jamar Chase, who's literally like the best wide receiver in the NFL, was like, I can just focus and get my work done here.
Yeah.
Like there's no distractions. And so you could say that's a negative to living here, but you can also say in another regard, it's a positive, right?
Yeah, which I think I hate when, I like that idea, but I hate when they go deeper into that and there's nothing to do. There's no fun. I was like, okay, whatever. But I do think, you'd ask what are the negatives, and I think it'd be really easy if somebody said, hey, if somebody's able to distill their values to know is this a good fit, right? Because there are going to be things that people value that you can't get here and aren't emphasized here. But I would venture to say that if you ask people, who are considering moving here, hey, what are your values? As most people in general, most of the top tier values that people hold do align with this place.
Yeah.
And if they're actually to get honest with themselves, because I think that's the thing, right? I've heard countless stories of people who've moved to these larger cities and realized, gosh, what I thought this was going to be is actually not what I want at all. And it's exhausting, and the pace and all of these things have just taken its toll, and it's exhausting. And I think it's when people are able, I think we're designed to need this balance. And I think Cincinnati provides great balance. So,
yeah, you have thoughts on that?
Actually, what I'm thinking of is when we go out west, it feels different, especially when you get all the way to California. Even driving the roads, I'm people seem in a rush, and I feel it feels different here to me. I
don't know.
You don't think so?
No, I mean, maybe.
That.
I feel I still get, people honking at me.
Maybe it's that in some of these other
Speeding somewhere
western
quick.
cities, it feels a little more pretentious when I'm out and about, and I don't feel that here. I feel we can be downtown, and it's not I can't even approach these people.
Yeah.
Or
I think that's a really good point. I mean, oftentimes if I throw this question out there on Facebook, for some reason people say, oh, it's the people, or people are friendly here, or it's approachable, and I don't think that captures it fully.
Yeah.
But there is something different. I mean, the idea of this video is it a good place to raise a family? And I think there is. You've kind of hit on this in a number of ways. If you want to seek fame, if you want ambition, if you want media or spotlight, or beauty, or pure beauty of geography, there might be other places that beat Cincinnati. But I think Cincinnati in particular, if you're no, I want to be connected to community and I want to raise my kids here. And we know, because we kind of run in these circles where there is a unique component to Cincinnati where there's a lot of families that we know throughout the city who are thinking multi-generationally. They're not just thinking about raising their kids. They're thinking about, no, I want my kids to raise their kids and their kids. And I want to be around them. And this city, I think, is really unique for that in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of components to that and I'm curious your thoughts, but there's the cost of living is a part of that, the education is a part of that, the friendliness, the safety, all of that. But also, and the tradition and the history, people who have, oftentimes people will grow up here, they'll move away, they'll experience other cities, and they'll be like, no, I'm gonna move back.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. There's a lot of people from Sztanyo, who are like, I grew up there, now I wanna come back.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really interesting. Just to share a quick story, like I moved here when I was 6 years old. We moved here because of a job with the airport, and my dad we came down here from Michigan. And when I was a younger father, I had 2 kids. I asked my grandfather who lived in Michigan, I said, and his 3 kids all grew up and moved away. And they moved to Chicago, they moved to Cincinnati, and they moved to Dallas. And I asked him, Grandpa, like, what was that like? Was that really hard for you? As I was thinking about these things of like my kids growing up and becoming adults. And he said, he kind of shrugged and was like, well, it was kind of rural farm area in northern Michigan. There weren't a whole lot of jobs here. They had to go. And we, I grew up seeing my grandparents 2 to 3 times a year because it was a 5-6 hour drive away, And I'm like, that's so sad. I don't want that. And right after that, my brothers, we were having the conversation. My middle brother who lives here locally too, I was like, we need to stay here. Like, I want to be around my kids. I want to be around my grandkids. And this city lets us do that, where there's enough opportunity, like it's a big enough city, they can experience enough things where whatever they kind of want to pursue career-wise, they could do that here. But it's small enough where we can still be connected and be around our family for multiple generations.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, in that vein is what I've seen is even folks who move here from other cities, whether they're large or not, the willingness of their family to also move here. And typically it's like, so I don't know if it's as you age or get older, I think a few things are happening. One is the place you live in maybe isn't as important in some ways as far as what attracted you there, whether it was a job, you're retired, it's not as important, or you used to do all these things, maybe you're not as active as you used to be, and the importance of being connected to family elevates in importance. And I think it's fun that seeing this story of people moving, there's a couple I'm thinking of specifically who moved from Oregon and got a house, and then their parents moved as well, and were very eager and willing, and it's a place where you can build that. And what you don't typically see, again, for a lot of reasons that you've already mentioned, is we moved to Oregon, get a house, and then our family from the Midwest comes with. Like, that's a very different type of story to live than what you could build.
I mean, there's some economics, and there's some, from the real estate side of things, there's some reason why, like, it's expensive to move to Oregon.
Very expensive,
It's, and so all those things we've already mentioned, but, and we're going to probably do a video soon on, like, is Cincinnati a good place to retire? But for some of those reasons is like, if it's affordable, you can actually do it. I think to the weather standpoint, we kind of hit before, when we mentioned Nashville's just 4 hours south of here, but it has experienced a boom. And like, you can't really move a whole family there, like from a cost standpoint. And here there's an opportunity for that. If a couple comes, often that's happened a lot with Sztanyo, where the parents are coming right after.
Effect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, any other thoughts? I appreciate your guys' time. But if you're thinking, anything else you want to share, pros and cons, goods or bads, or just your guys' unique story about raising your family here that you think people would want to know.
So I did think of one thing I dislike about Cincinnati.
Yeah.
The humidity in the summer.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's true.
It's most of all I can think of.
Dry heat would be great.
The good news is you can't ride your bike when it's humid. So
So the bike paths are a non-issue then.
yeah, so it actually evens itself out.
Yeah, no, they're a great bike path. To be clear,
Yeah, there's like
they're
an
a great.
amazing
I know,
bike trail
I
that
know.
goes everywhere.
But that's not what I meant. I meant
You meant from
more-
a commute
I meant from a
standpoint.
commuting
Yeah.
and just like getting around.
And that's much more common in
standpoint.
other cities where that's part of the
Yeah.
daily commute. I think that like another one people don't like is public transport. Like we have our streetcar that goes in a circle downtown. And we have a pretty good bus system, but just like a lot of people don't use it.
Yeah.
Like, so we don't have, the underground subway was
Yeah.
whatever. It's it's going to be turned into a restaurant soon or whatever. So like, but humidity, you mentioned, yeah, I think weather-wise, it's not as bad as like Georgia,
Right.
Carolina, Florida type humidity, but it is like come late July and August.
But it's like
you're
a
feeling
short
it.
stint.
Yeah.
It's like 4 to 6 weeks. You just got to get
Yeah.
through it.
And you either have to have a pool or have some friends that have a pool.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then one other thing I thought of, and mostly as I think about you, is the sports in the city. And it's a hot take, I like that none of the teams
Are good.
are great. And I like that
Just
because
good enough.
But they're just good enough. And I think that's actually really important. It's like I love that I can take my kids to these games and expose them and enjoy all that those things, entail. But I also love that the pressure to be obsessed.
Yeah.
Again, there's always that, ditch on this side, but the pressure to be obsessed goes way down in Cincinnati. At least that's how I feel.
Except
Yeah.
for the one year we went to the Super Bowl.
This is the one year.
Yeah,
we
and-
over.
And
That
we're
was
still,
it.
It's
we're
usually
trying to get back there.
surprised, not
Yeah.
expectant.
people
and I
around
think
here
being
were like, oh my
expectant-
gosh,
Yeah.
what is happening?
I know.
So
Yes.
I would say that's a pro. Some people who might, want value, kind of that
Yeah,
aspect.
the
would
Reds.
make
I mean,
that a
taking your
con.
family to a Reds game, I think it's like the or the second most affordable
Yeah.
ballpark in all the major league.
Yeah.
And so you can get down there. You
Which
can
is
bring food
bad
into
for the
ballpark.
Reds, great for us.
Like you could literally take food into the ballpark, and it's super affordable. Yeah, you can get cheap seats. Like
Right.
it's great experience for that.
So
You can see
that's
everyone
fun.
else's big stars.
Right.
And like
Yeah.
you see Cincinnati stars for a year or two, and then they go in free agency to the other big cities, and then you see them when they come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
that's right.
Cool.
Sweet. Thank you.
All right. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I hope this was helpful for you guys. As someone who's lived here, has seen other cities, again, is Cincinnati a good place to raise a family? McMurrays?
Yes.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you for the time.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes.
It's 2 thumbs up.
But we're moving.
Do I have a real estate agent for you?
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Sweet.
Yeah, thank you.
Sztanyo, I hope you enjoyed that content. If you're not from around here and we missed something, let us know in the comments below. If you are from around here and we missed something, let us know in the comments below. And give me an idea. Do you like this longer form interviews? We can do more of these to try to get you a better feel of what it's like to live here in the Cincinnati area. As always, if you are moving here and you need a real estate team, reach out to us, 513-813-6293. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.